Emily walked slowly through the gates of her new school, clutching the straps of her backpack. The sun was shining brightly, but to her it felt like a heavy day. She had been the new girl before, and she knew what that meant. People would stare. Some would whisper. Others might laugh. She wasn't used to crowds, and she never enjoyed being the center of attention. Her old school was far away now. Her father had decided to move to this town because he wanted a quieter life after years of serving in the military. Emily respected his choice, but it meant she had to start all over again. As she walked up the steps, she kept her head down. She wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans. Her long hair was tied back in a ponytail. There was nothing flashy about her, and that was how she wanted it. She believed that blending in was easier than standing out, but even with her quiet steps, people noticed her. A group of students sitting near the entrance whispered and looked her way. She could feel their eyes on her, but she ignored them. Behind the fence, just a few feet from the school entrance, sat her German shepherd, Rex. His ears were straight, his eyes alert, and his posture firm. He wasn't just lying lazily like other dogs would. He was waiting, watching, as if guarding a door. Some kids passing by slowed down when they saw him. "That's a big dog," one boy muttered to his friend. Another girl whispered, "Looks scary." A few even stepped to the side of the sidewalk to avoid getting too close. Emily gave Rex a small smile before walking into the building. She knew he was safe there waiting for her. Rex was not just a pet. He was her best friend, her companion, and her protector. She trusted him more than she trusted most people. Ever since she was little, Rex had been by her side. He had been trained by her father, and Emily had grown up around his disciplined ways. She didn't see Rex as dangerous. She saw him as loyal, strong, and loving. Inside the school, the hallways were busy with chatter. Students laughed, lockers banged, footsteps echoed. For Emily, it felt like noise pressing in from all sides. She moved quickly, holding her schedule in her hand. She needed to find her first class, but the paper seemed confusing at that moment. She stopped near a corner, trying to figure out the room number. "Lost already?" A boy's voice called out. Emily looked up. A tall boy with styled hair and a smirk on his face was leaning against a locker with two of his friends beside him. They all looked at her as if they had found something amusing. Emily stayed quiet. She didn't want trouble. She turned her eyes back to her schedule. "Hey, I'm talking to you," the boy said again, this time louder. Emily didn't respond. She had learned that sometimes silence was better than words, but the laughter of his friends told her that they thought she was weak. She felt a small knot form in her stomach, but she pushed it down and walked away. The first class of the day was English. Emily walked in and found an empty seat at the back. The teacher, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, introduced her to the class. "Everyone, this is Emily. She's new here, so let's make her feel welcome." Some students smiled politely, but others just stared blankly. Throughout the morning, Emily focused on her work, trying not to think about the stares or whispers. She was used to being quiet. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't try to join in the conversations, and she didn't seek attention. Her way was simple: finish the day and get home to Rex. By lunchtime, Emily walked to the cafeteria with her tray of food. The room was filled with noise, laughter, and the clatter of trays. She looked around for an empty table, but almost every spot was taken. Finally, she saw a small table near the corner. She sat down quickly and began eating. But she wasn't alone for long. The same boy from the hallway walked over with his friends. He carried his tray with a cocky grin, and his friends followed like shadows. Without asking, he sat down across from her. "So, new girl," he began, dragging his words. "What's your name again?" "Emily, right?" Emily kept eating, pretending not to hear him. "Rude," he said with a laugh. His friend nudged her tray with his elbow, spilling a bit of juice. They laughed harder. Emily calmly cleaned the mess with a napkin, not saying a word. She had faced worse. Her father had always told her, "People will try to get under your skin, but remember, strength isn't in shouting, it's in control." The bullies didn't like that she ignored them. They wanted a reaction, but Emily gave them nothing. Finally, the boy leaned in and whispered, "Is that big scary dog outside yours? What's his name?" "Monster?" His friends burst into laughter again. Emily finally looked up. Her eyes were steady, calm, and a little cold. "His name is Rex," she said softly. The boy smirked. "Rex sounds like a guard dog. Does he bite?" Emily didn't answer. She stood up, picked up her tray, and walked away. The boys laughed louder, but there was a hint of frustration in their voices. They weren't used to someone refusing to play their game. When the final bell rang, Emily walked out of the building. Rex was there, standing tall, wagging his tail when he saw her. She reached down and patted his head. The comfort she felt at that moment washed away the stress of the day. But as she began walking toward the bike racks, she noticed the same group of boys leaning against the fence. They were waiting. She could feel their eyes on her again. One of them nudged the other and pointed toward Rex. Emily kept walking, but her steps were slower. She knew they weren't finished with their teasing. She could hear their whispers behind her. Her heart raced, but she also knew something they didn't. Rex was not to be underestimated. As Rex walked closely beside her, his sharp eyes scanning every movement, Emily whispered softly, "Easy, boy. Not yet." The bullies laughed as she passed by, but none of them dared come too close. They could sense something about Rex that made them hesitate. He wasn't just a dog waiting for trouble. He was a protector trained to act only when needed. Emily walked away quietly, but inside she knew this was only the beginning. The bullies thought she was an easy target, and they had no idea who they were dealing with. They didn't know the bond she shared with Rex. They didn't know the strength that came from silence, and they didn't know that one wrong step could change everything. The next morning, Emily walked through the school gates again, her backpack tight against her shoulders. She felt the same uneasy knot in her stomach. She hoped the day would be quiet, but a part of her knew it wouldn't be. Rex was sitting by the fence again, waiting for her with his sharp eyes and alert ears. His presence gave her strength, but she also knew that the bullies from yesterday had not forgotten about her. As Emily entered the hallway, she noticed whispers following her. Some students stared at her, while others giggled as if sharing a secret. She quickly realized they were talking about her and Rex. The story from lunch the day before had spread. The boy and his friends had told everyone how the new girl with the scary dog ignored them. But instead of embarrassing her, the story seemed to make people more curious. "Hey, that's her," a girl whispered to her friend. "Her dog looks dangerous. Do you think it would attack someone?" The friend asked. "I don't know. She looks too quiet to fight anyone," the first girl replied. Emily kept walking, ignoring the voices. She had learned long ago that responding only gave more fuel to gossip. Still, she could feel the attention pressing down on her shoulders. She wished people would just see her as a normal student. By midday, everything seemed calm until she entered the cafeteria. She picked up her tray, choosing the simplest food she could find, and looked for a place to sit. But before she could sit down, the same group of bullies appeared again. The leader, the tall boy with the arrogant smirk, blocked her path with his tray. His friends stood on either side of him, grinning like they were about to watch a show. "Well, look who it is. The new girl," he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Students turned their heads toward them, waiting to see what would happen. Emily didn't answer. She tried to step around him, but he moved to block her again. "Whoa, where are you going? Don't you want to sit with us?" he asked, his voice dripping with fake kindness. His friends laughed. One of them pointed at her tray. "Careful, don't spill it again." Emily kept her face calm. She didn't want to give them the reaction they wanted. She turned and walked to the farthest corner of the cafeteria, sitting alone. She started eating in silence, but the bullies weren't finished. After a few minutes, they walked over to her table. The tall boy sat across from her without asking, just like yesterday. He leaned on the table with a smirk. "So, Emily," he said, pretending to be friendly, "I hear your dog is trained. What does he do? Fetch sticks? Roll over?" His friend chuckled. "Maybe he chases cats. Or maybe he's just a big puppy." Emily's eyes flickered up at them. She wanted to tell them the truth, that Rex was no ordinary dog, that he was disciplined, trained, and more capable than they could imagine. But she kept her mouth shut. Revealing too much would only make things worse. The tall boy tapped her tray with his fork. "Tell me something. Does your dog bite?" Emily's voice was soft but steady. "Not unless he has to." The boys laughed loudly as if her answer was a joke. "Not unless he has to? What does that even mean?" One of them said, slapping the table. "Maybe she's just making stuff up," another added. Emily stood up again, picking up her tray. She refused to stay there. She walked toward the trash can and dropped the leftovers, then left the cafeteria. Behind her, the laughter followed, but she didn't turn around. That afternoon, Emily stayed quiet in her classes. She didn't raise her hand or speak unless a teacher asked her directly. She could feel the bullies watching her in the hallways. They whispered things under their breath as she passed by, but she never stopped walking. She didn't show fear, but deep inside she knew they were planning something more. When the final bell rang, Emily felt relieved. She wanted to go home, away from the whispers and laughter. As she walked outside, she saw Rex waiting patiently near the fence. His tail wagged the moment he spotted her. Emily smiled for the first time all day as she reached out and scratched his head. But as she turned toward the bike racks, her relief vanished. The bullies were waiting for her again. This time, they weren't trying to hide it. They leaned against the metal racks, arms crossed, watching her approach. Well, if it isn't the new girl," the tall boy said, stepping forward. His smirk was wider than ever. His friends closed in on either side, forming a loose circle around her. Emily tightened her grip on Rex's leash. The dog sensed the tension immediately. His ears perked up and his body shifted slightly, ready to react. Emily gave a quick tug on the leash, signaling him to stay calm. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. The tall boy chuckled. "Relax, we just want to talk. You've been acting like you're too good for everyone, walking around with your big scary dog. People are saying things, you know." Emily didn't reply. She stood still, her hand resting gently on Rex's collar. The boys stepped closer. One of them picked up a small stone from the ground and tossed it in the air. "What happens if we throw this at your dog? Will he bark? Or will he run away?" "Don't," Emily said firmly, her voice sharper now. The boy grinned. "Or what, he's just a dog, and you're just a girl." With that, he tossed the stone, not hard, but enough for it to bounce near Rex's paws. Rex growled immediately, a deep, powerful sound that made the air feel heavy. The bullies froze for a second, their laughter fading. Rex stepped forward, his body tense, his teeth showing slightly as he stood between Emily and the boys. Emily held his leash tightly. "I told you not to," she said calmly. For a moment, silence filled the air. The boys exchanged uneasy glances. They hadn't expected such a reaction. Rex's growl wasn't playful. It was controlled, like he knew exactly what he was doing. His eyes stayed locked on the boys, his body forming a shield in front of Emily. The tall boy tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "See, he's just barking. He won't do anything." Emily's eyes were cold and steady. She spoke one word, firm, sharp, and in German. "Sitz." Instantly, Rex sat down, still staring at the bullies with unblinking eyes. The boys gasped softly. They realized the dog wasn't acting wild. He was following precise orders. He wasn't just a pet. He was trained. Emily gave another command, her voice calm but strong. Rex shifted slightly, still alert, still watching every move the boys made. The bullies took a step back. For the first time, they looked unsure. The tall boy muttered, "Come on, guys. Let's go." His smirk was gone. As they backed away, Rex's growl faded, but his eyes never left them until they were far down the street. Emily bent down and stroked his head. "Good boy," she whispered. Rex wagged his tail once, then returned to his calm, steady posture. Emily stood up straight, her heart still racing. She knew this wasn't the end. The bullies would think twice now, but they would also be more curious. They had seen a glimpse of Rex's training and they would want to know more. But Emily also knew something else. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced them, and Rex had stood by her side. Together they were stronger than any group of bullies. As she walked home with Rex trotting proudly beside her, Emily's mind was clear. The boys thought she was weak. They thought she was alone. But they were wrong. She had Rex. And Rex was more than just a dog. He was a protector, a fighter, and her most loyal friend. The following days at school felt strange for Emily. After the scene near the bike racks, the bullies seemed quieter whenever she passed. They still whispered to each other, but they didn't dare get too close. Other students, however, had started looking at her differently. Whispers spread faster than wildfire. Everyone had seen or heard how her German Shepherd Rex had growled and stood guard like a trained soldier. "Did you see the way that dog listened to her?" one boy said to his friend in the hallway. "Yeah, that wasn't normal. That dog didn't even move until she said a word." "He's like a police dog or something," the friend replied. Emily noticed the stares, but she stayed calm. She didn't want attention, but she couldn't stop people from talking. All she cared about was finishing each day, walking out of the school and finding Rex waiting for her faithfully at the gate. But the bullies hadn't truly gone away. Their pride was hurt. The tall boy, whose name was Jason, couldn't forget the way Rex had made him feel small in front of his friends. At night, he told himself it wasn't a big deal, but deep down he burned with embarrassment. He wanted to prove that he was in control, not Emily or her dog. One afternoon after classes ended, Emily was walking toward the exit when she noticed Jason and his group standing near the main doors. They watched her closely, and she felt the tension in the air. She kept her eyes forward, trying to ignore them, but this time they didn't just let her walk away. "Hey, new girl," Jason called out loudly so the students around could hear. "We're not finished." Emily stopped, holding her books tighter. She turned slowly, her calm eyes on him. "What do you want?" Jason smirked. "I want to see what your dog can really do. Yesterday he barked a little, big deal. Let's see if he's actually dangerous or if he's just for show." Emily's face stayed steady. "Rex is not a game. Don't test him." Jason's friends laughed, egging him on. "Come on, Jason, show her you're not scared of a dog." Emily walked past them without another word. But Jason wasn't done. He and his friends followed her outside, toward the bike racks where Rex waited patiently. Rex immediately noticed the boys. His ears stood tall and his eyes narrowed. His muscles tensed under his golden brown fur. Emily gave Rex a small signal with her hand, reminding him to stay calm. She placed her books in her bag and prepared to leave, but Jason stepped in front of her again. "You keep acting like you're untouchable because of this dog." Jason sneered. "But let's see how brave you really are." One of his friends bent down, picked up a stick from the ground and waved it toward Rex. "Here, doggy. Want to fetch?" He teased. Emily's voice was sharp this time. "Stop." But the boy flicked the stick closer, and that was the last straw. Rex stood in front of Emily, his body low, his teeth bared in a silent snarl. His growl was low and steady, the kind of sound that came from deep inside his chest. It wasn't wild or uncontrolled. It was precise. The ground almost seemed to vibrate under the power of it. The boys froze. Their laughter died instantly. Rex wasn't acting like a normal pet. He wasn't lunging randomly. He was watching every move they made, ready to respond. Jason tried to hide his fear with a shaky laugh. "See, he's just making noise." "That's all." Emily looked at him firmly. She spoke one single word in German. "Fass." The effect was immediate. Rex moved forward with lightning speed, his powerful body surging like a shadow. He didn't bite, but he snapped the stick out of the boy's hand with his teeth and tossed it to the ground. The boy stumbled back, pale with shock. Rex then returned to Emily's side, his eyes still locked on the group, his growl rumbling softly as if daring them to take another step. Gasps erupted from the students nearby who had been watching from a distance. They had never seen anything like it. It wasn't random aggression. It was discipline, skill, and control. Emily placed a hand gently on Rex's neck. "Zurück," she said. Immediately, Rex stepped back and sat down, still guarding her with his eyes but perfectly calm at her command. Jason's face turned red. His pride was crushed again, but this time it was worse. Everyone had seen it. He stammered, that was just a trick. Nothing special. But his voice shook and his friends weren't laughing anymore. One of them whispered, "Man, that dog is trained. Like really trained. I think he's dangerous." Jason glared at them, but he couldn't deny what he had just witnessed. He had wanted to expose Emily and Rex as fake, but instead, he had only revealed how unprepared he was. Emily looked at Jason calmly. "I warned you. Don't push him again." She turned and walked away, Rex trotting beside her, his tail swaying but his body still alert. The crowd of students parted to let her pass, their eyes wide with respect and awe. Some whispered to each other in amazement. That was like a police dog. She didn't even raise her voice. He just listened instantly. Jason looked terrified. As Emily and Rex disappeared down the street, Jason stood frozen. His friends muttered excuses and drifted away, leaving him alone in his anger and humiliation. He clenched his fists, swearing under his breath. He wanted revenge, but deep down he knew he had already lost. At home that evening, Emily sat on the porch with Rex lying at her feet. She stroked his fur gently, remembering the look on Jason's face when Rex had taken the stick. She felt a quiet sense of pride, not because Rex had scared the bullies, but because he had shown his discipline so perfectly. He hadn't hurt anyone. He had simply protected. Her father, sitting nearby, noticed the thoughtful look on her face. "Rough day?" he asked. Emily gave a small nod. Rex showed them who he really is. Her father smiled faintly. That's what he was trained for. To protect, but with control. People think strength is about fighting, Real strength is knowing when not to. Emily looked down at Rex, who was now calm and resting, his eyes half closed. She knew her father was right. Rex wasn't just a fighter, he was a guardian, and together they were a team that no bully could ever break. That night, word of the incident spread across the town. Students told their parents, and parents spoke to teachers. Everyone was talking about the quiet new girl with the German shepherd that could obey commands like a soldier. Some admired her, others were cautious, but one thing was clear. Emily and Rex were no longer invisible. They had made an impression that no one would forget. And while Emily wanted nothing more than a peaceful life, she also knew that this was only the beginning. The bullies might back off for now, but their pride would not let them forget. The story of Rex's training had just begun to unfold, and the real test of loyalty and courage was yet to come. The next morning, Emily walked into school as usual, Rex walking beside her until they reached the fence. His steady gaze followed her as she disappeared into the building. Inside, the hallways buzzed with more chatter than ever before. Whispers chased her every step. By now, nearly everyone had heard about what happened with Jason and his friends. Students who had never noticed Emily before now stared at her with wide eyes. Some whispered with curiosity, others with admiration. That's her. That's the girl with the German shepherd. They say he can take commands in another language. I heard he took a stick right out of someone's hand. Emily tried to ignore them. She never liked attention, and she certainly didn't want to be treated like a spectacle. But she also understood that once people saw something extraordinary, they couldn't help but talk about it. During her second class of the day, her teacher, Mr. Harris, noticed the distracted looks of the students. They weren't focused on the lesson. They kept glancing at Emily. Finally, he paused and sighed. All right, let's settle something. Yes, Emily has a well-trained dog. No, he is not a danger to anyone unless provoked. And no, this is not a circus. Now can we focus? The class chuckled nervously, but the whispers didn't completely die. Later that afternoon, Emily was called to the principal's office. She walked in nervously, wondering if she had somehow broken a rule. Sitting across the desk was the principal, Mrs. Green, a kind but strict woman. Beside her sat another teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, who taught history. Emily, Mrs. Green began gently. We've heard about the incident with your dog. Some parents are concerned, and we need to understand the situation better. Can you explain? Emily hesitated, then nodded slowly. Rex is trained. He doesn't hurt people unless he thinks I'm in danger. He listens only to me and my father. He's not like a normal dog. Mrs. Alvarez leaned forward with interest. Trained how? He didn't act wild at all, did he? Emily shook her head. No, he's disciplined. My father taught him. My dad used to serve in the army. Rex was trained during those years. I grew up around it. The teachers exchanged a look. Mrs. Green adjusted her glasses. So your father trained military dogs? Yes, Emily said softly. He worked with canine units. Rex was one of them. When my father retired, Rex came home with us. He's part of the family now. He protects, but only when he must. For a moment, the office was quiet. Mrs. Green finally smiled. That explains a lot. Thank you, Emily. You've been very patient. I'll make sure the other teachers understand so no one misunderstands Rex's role. Emily left the office feeling lighter. She hadn't wanted to talk about Rex's history. But perhaps it was better if the truth was known. By the end of the day, rumors had turned into stories. Students now whispered not only about Rex but also about Emily's background. Her dad was in the army. That's why the dog listens like that. She probably grew up watching all the training. That's why she's so calm. It makes sense now. She's not scared because she knows exactly what Rex can do. Even the bullies heard the stories. Jason scowled every time someone mentioned Rex. His pride had taken 2 heavy blows, and now everyone was talking about how strong and disciplined Emily's dog was. That evening, Emily walked home with Rex trotting proudly beside her. She thought about the day's events and how everything had changed so quickly. She hadn't wanted attention, yet somehow she had become the center of it. At dinner, her father noticed her thoughtful silence. Something on your mind? He asked gently. Emily nodded. Everyone knows now. About Rex, about you. I had to tell them. Her father put down his fork and smiled faintly. That's all right. There's no shame in it. You didn't brag, you didn't use it to show off. You spoke the truth. People respect honesty. Emily stroked Rex's fur under the table, feeling his warmth and loyalty. Some of them respected, but others, she paused, thinking of Jason's angry face. Her father's eyes narrowed slightly. Bullies don't like when they lose. But remember, they lost because they picked the wrong fight. Rex did exactly what he was trained to do. Protect without hurting. That's a lesson they won't forget. The next day at school, the atmosphere was different. Many students smiled at Emily as she walked past. Some even greeted her with quiet respect. One girl in her math class leaned over and whispered, "Your dog is amazing." Another boy asked, "Do you think you could train a dog like mine?" Emily gave polite answers, but she never bragged. She simply said, "Rex is special. He was trained for a purpose." During lunch, something unexpected happened. A teacher named Mr. Dalton, who had served in the military years ago, approached her table. "I've heard about Rex," he said with a knowing smile. "Your father must have done excellent work. Dogs like that don't just follow commands, they understand loyalty." Emily nodded with quiet pride. "He's more than a dog. He's family." Mr. Dalton's expression softened. "That's the best kind of training. When it's built on trust, not fear." The conversation spread even further. Soon people weren't just talking about Rex, they were talking about Emily. She wasn't just the quiet new girl anymore. She was the daughter of a man who had served his country, the girl who walked with discipline, the one who carried herself with calm strength. Jason, meanwhile, grew more frustrated with every passing day. The more people admired Emily and Rex, the more invisible he felt. He had once been the loudest voice in the room, the boy everyone looked to for jokes and bravado. But now people only talked about Emily's courage and Rex's training. At home, Jason threw his basketball against the garage wall, muttering angrily, "She thinks she's better than me because of that stupid dog." His friends avoided answering. Even they were shaken by what they had seen. None of them wanted to provoke Rex again. As the week went on, Emily noticed fewer taunts in the hallway. The laughter at her expense had stopped. The bullies avoided direct confrontation. She had not only earned respect but also unintentionally silenced those who once mocked her. One afternoon, a younger student dropped his books in the hallway, and before anyone else could react, Emily bent down to help him. The boy smiled shyly. "Thanks," he whispered. And in that simple moment, Emily realized something had shifted. She was no longer the outsider people ignored or mocked. She was someone others looked at with quiet admiration, but she also knew that respect came with responsibility. She couldn't afford to lose her calm. She couldn't let anger guide her, no matter how much Jason or anyone else pushed. She had to be steady, just like Rex. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily sat outside with Rex lying by her feet. The air was cool and the sky painted itself in shades of orange and purple. She stroked Rex's fur and whispered, "We're not invisible anymore, are we?" Rex wagged his tail softly, his eyes half closed but alert as always. Emily smiled, knowing that their bond had brought them this far. She also knew that more challenges would come. People admired strength, but some also envied it, and she could already sense that Jason wasn't finished. For now, though, Emily allowed herself to breathe. The truth about her and Rex was out. People finally understood, and with every whisper of respect in the hallways, she felt a little stronger. The final week of the month began with a crisp morning. The air was cool, the sky a bright shade of blue, and Emily walked into school with her usual calm steps. But this time something was different. Students didn't just stare at her anymore, they greeted her. Some smiled, others waved, and a few even said, "Good morning, Emily." She returned the gestures with small nods and polite smiles. Deep inside, she was still the same quiet girl, but now she carried herself with more confidence. She no longer felt invisible. She no longer felt like the new girl who didn't belong. Rex had become a school legend. Even though he waited outside the fence each day, his presence was felt inside every hallway. Students spoke of him with awe. "That dog is unbelievable," one said. "He doesn't just bark, he listens like a soldier." Another replied, "Yeah, but it's not just the dog. Did you notice how calm Emily is? She's fearless." Emily didn't see herself as fearless, but she understood why people said it. Her father's lessons and Rex's discipline had shaped her. She didn't shout, she didn't fight, but her silence carried power. But not everyone was happy with the change. Jason, the boy who had mocked her from the start, couldn't stand the way attention had shifted away from him. Every laugh in the hallway that wasn't about him felt like an insult. Every whisper about Emily and Rex felt like a knife to his pride. One afternoon, Jason cornered his friends in the gym. "I'm not letting her win," he said angrily. "She thinks she's better than us because of that dog. But what is she without him? Nothing. Just a scared little girl." His friends exchanged uneasy glances. One of them muttered, "I don't know, Jason, that dog isn't normal. I don't want to mess with him again." Jason slammed his fist against the lockers. "You're all cowards. I'll handle this myself." The next day, Emily was walking out of the building after the last bell when Jason stepped into her path. His face was tense, his jaw tight. Students nearby stopped to watch, sensing that something was about to happen. Emily's hand instinctively tightened on Rex's leash. The dog stood tall, ears sharp, eyes locked on Jason. Jason lifted his chin. "You think you're special because of this dog? Because people are scared of him?" His voice was louder than usual, meant for the crowd. "You hide behind him. But without him, you're nothing." Emily stayed calm. Her voice was steady when she answered, "I don't hide behind Rex, we stand together." "That's something you wouldn't understand," the crowd murmured. Jason's face turned red. He had wanted to humiliate her, but her calm words only made him look angrier. He stepped closer, testing the limits. "Then prove it. Tell your dog to stay back." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Everyone stared at Emily, wondering what she would do. For a moment, she hesitated. She didn't want Rex to step aside. He was her protector, her partner. But then she remembered her father's words. "Real strength is knowing when not to fight." Emily took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "Rex Blybe." Immediately, Rex sat down at her side. His eyes never left Jason, but he didn't move forward. His body was tense, ready, but controlled. Emily stepped forward alone. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the crowd. "You think I'm weak without him. But strength isn't about shouting the loudest or pushing people down. Strength is staying calm when others want you to break. Strength is knowing when to walk away." The crowd fell silent. Jason's eyes darted nervously around, realizing that every student was watching, not laughing at Emily, but at him. He had wanted to expose her weakness, but instead she had exposed his. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face burned with humiliation. Finally, he turned sharply and pushed through the crowd, storming away. His friends didn't follow. They stayed behind, their eyes on Emily with something close to respect. Emily turned back to Rex. She gave him a gentle pat on the head. "Good boy," she whispered. Rex wagged his tail softly, his loyalty shining in his steady gaze. The crowd began to disperse, but the whispers were different now. "Did you see that? She didn't even need her dog to win." She stood up to Jason with nothing but words. "She's braver than all of us." From that day on, the teasing stopped completely. Jason never bothered Emily again. He avoided her in the hallways, his pride too wounded to face her. The other students treated Emily with respect, not out of fear, but because they admired her strength. Over the next weeks, Emily found herself slowly opening up. She joined group projects in class, answered more questions, and even made a few friends. People no longer saw her as the shy new girl. They saw her as the girl who had courage and discipline, the one who had earned their respect. Rex, of course, remained her constant companion. Every morning he sat by the fence, and every afternoon he walked her home. Students passing by often stopped to wave at him, some even daring to scratch behind his ears. Rex accepted it calmly, but his eyes always returned to Emily, never forgetting his duty. One Friday evening, as the sun set, Emily and her father sat on the porch together. Rex lay at their feet, relaxed but alert. Her father spoke first. "You've changed, Emily. You walk differently now. You stand taller." Emily smiled softly. "It's Rex. He gave me courage." Her father shook his head gently. "No, Rex reminded you of the courage you already had. You just needed to see it." Emily looked at Rex, her loyal friend, and felt warmth spread through her heart. She knew her father was right. Rex had shown her strength, but the choice to stay calm, to face the bullies, and to walk forward had been hers. From that day forward, Emily never doubted herself again. She had faced bullies, earned respect, and learned that true strength was not in fighting but in control, loyalty, and courage. And whenever she walked through the school gates with Rex waiting by the fence, she carried not just the pride of having a loyal guardian, but the quiet power of knowing who she really was.